Have you ever noticed how some relationships seem to unravel not because of betrayal, lack of love, or financial struggle, but after a woman crosses the invisible threshold of 45? It is almost as if a silent earthquake shakes the foundation of intimacy, leaving both partners wondering what went wrong. Picture this: a couple married for 2 decades, children nearly grown, stability finally within reach. Outwardly, everything seems calm. Yet beneath the surface there is a quiet storm. She begins questioning choices, doubting old routines, and feeling a restlessness that is hard to name. He feels the distance growing but cannot pinpoint why. Many of us have seen this happen to friends, siblings, even our own parents, and maybe we fear it happening to us. The truth is, something profound shifts in many women around this age. It is not simply about physical changes or the cliches of midlife crisis. It is about identity, meaning, and the silent reckoning with time. The questions that were once suppressed by the demands of motherhood, career, and survival suddenly rise with urgency. Who am I beyond these roles? What do I want for the years ahead? This is the moment where many relationships stumble, not because one partner is wrong, but because both are unprepared for the depth of transformation underway. It is unsettling, even frightening, to watch someone you love no longer fit the patterns that once defined them. And yet, if we look closer, this is not a story of decline. It can be the doorway to a more honest, mature, and resilient love, if we dare to face it with clarity rather than denial. So let me ask you directly, have you ever sensed this silent shift in someone close to you or even within yourself? What if the very thing that seems to ruin relationships could, in truth, be the hidden opportunity to rebuild them on stronger, deeper ground? Stay with me, because in this video we will explore the hidden forces that awaken in women after 45, why so many couples fail to recognize them, and how this knowledge can transform the way we approach love, maturity, and partnership. Before we go deeper, I invite you, share in the comments if you have ever witnessed or experienced this invisible turning point. And if you believe these reflections matter, don't forget to like and subscribe, because the conversations we start here may change the way you see relationships forever. What if the shift that so many women experience after 45 was not a threat to love, but its greatest gift? Imagine for a moment that instead of fear and distance, this season became the spark for deeper intimacy, richer conversations, and a renewed sense of partnership. Close your eyes and picture this: a couple sitting together on the porch, no longer burdened by the chaos of raising children or chasing endless ambitions. For the first time in decades, they can hear themselves think and hear each other speak. She shares her doubts, her hunger for meaning, her desire for something more than repetition. Instead of reacting with defensiveness, he listens. He sees not a threat, but an invitation. What unfolds is not the slow death of romance, but the rebirth of connection. Now, contrast this with the common reality. Instead of listening, many partners dismiss or avoid these conversations. They cling to old patterns, assuming stability means sameness. But sameness is not stability, it is stagnation. The woman begins to feel unseen, unheard, and the distance grows like a quiet chasm. What could have been a chance for renewal becomes the beginning of the end. So here's the question worth asking. What if we chose to meet this midlife shift with curiosity instead of fear? What if instead of interpreting change as rejection, we received it as growth? Because the truth is, relationships either evolve or dissolve. There is no neutral ground. When women confront these questions of identity and meaning, they are not rejecting their partners. They are awakening to themselves. And this awakening, though unsettling, can become the soil where love matures beyond the illusions of youth. Think of it: a relationship not built merely on attraction, convenience, or habit, but on a profound respect for each other's unfolding humanity. Can you see how different the story could be if we embrace this stage of life as an invitation rather than a curse? The years after 45 do not have to be the graveyard of passion. They can be the beginning of a partnership rooted in truth. So I ask you now, in your own relationships, do you react to change with resistance, or do you lean into it with openness? The answer to that question might determine whether love survives this season or is quietly buried beneath unspoken fears. We have all heard the phrase midlife crisis. It usually comes with cliches, sports cars, sudden breakups, or impulsive reinventions. But here is the disruptive truth. What many call a crisis is not chaos at all. It is clarity. It is the moment when illusions built in our 20s and 30s finally collapse under the weight of reality. For women after 45, this clarity often feels like a rupture. The roles that once defined them, mother, caregiver, professional, suddenly feel incomplete. The mask of everything is fine begins to crack. Society may label this as instability, but in truth it is the most honest season of life. It is the courage to say, I cannot live by borrowed definitions anymore. Here is the paradox. What looks like disintegration is actually integration. What appears as loss is the beginning of authenticity. But because our culture idolizes youth and fears aging, we misread this transformation as decline. Relationships in turn collapse not because women change, but because partners resist acknowledging the change. Think of it this way. If you build a house on temporary scaffolding, sooner or later it must come down. The collapse is not failure. It is the necessary step to reveal what is permanent. Likewise, when women step into the season, they are stripping away scaffolding. They are asking, what is real? What will last? This is why so many relationships stumble. One partner expects stability to mean sameness while the other is pulled toward growth. The conflict is not about love disappearing. It is about one refusing to see that love itself must evolve. The disruptive insight is this. After 45, women are not losing themselves. They are finding themselves, often for the first time with courage. And the tragedy is not that they change, but that so many men and even women themselves mistake this awakening for a problem to be fixed rather than a truth to be honored. So let me turn the question to you. When someone you love begins to change, do you cling to the comfort of who they were, or do you have the humility to meet who they are becoming? Because that choice may decide whether a relationship ends in quiet resentment or blossoms into something astonishingly real. When we look for guidance in understanding these shifts, we realize that this is not a modern phenomenon. The Greeks called it the second adolescence of the soul. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist, described midlife as the time when the personality demands integration, when the hidden, neglected parts of the self rise to the surface, insisting to be acknowledged. He argued that ignoring this call leads to bitterness, while embracing it opens the path to wisdom. Literature, too, has long given voice to this turning point. In Dante's Divine Comedy, the journey begins with a man in the middle of the journey of life, finding himself lost in a dark forest. It is a metaphor for the exact moment many women feel after 45. The familiar map no longer works and a deeper orientation is required. Notice how Dante's descent into the unknown is not the end of his story, but the beginning of transformation. This insight reframes what so many dismiss as instability. It is not instability, it is initiation. It is the passage from one stage of life to another, with new demands, new questions, and new possibilities. Just as adolescence reshapes a teenager's body and mind, midlife reshapes the adult soul. But unlike adolescence, which is culturally celebrated, this stage is often feared or even mocked. That fear isolates women. It leaves them thinking, what is wrong with me? Why can't I feel satisfied with what I have? But the truth, echoed by philosophy and psychology, is that nothing is wrong. What they feel is the most ancient call of all, the call to live authentically. For relationships, this knowledge changes everything. Instead of interpreting a woman's questioning as ingratitude or rejection, a partner can see it as a sacred signal. A signal that she is no longer willing to live half asleep, that she is seeking something beyond roles and routines. And here lies the challenge. Will the partner mock this call, ignore it, or stand beside her as she walks into deeper waters? Jung reminds us that the unlived life does not simply disappear. It haunts us. But the life that is faced with courage becomes a source of vitality for both partners. So what if we began to see this shift not as a personal crisis, but as a universal passage? And what if, instead of resisting it, we prepared for it as we prepare for any sacred transition, with reverence, patience, and hope? Here is where things get subtle. Relationships after 45 often break not because of loud conflicts, but because of quiet, invisible patterns. Patterns that creep in silently, unnoticed, until the bond feels hollow. One of the most common is emotional invisibility. For years, many women pour themselves into roles: mother, caretaker, supporter. Their identity becomes entangled with service. But as children grow and responsibilities shift, they begin to ask, do I exist beyond what I give? When that question is ignored, distance grows. Another hidden pattern is habitual silence. Couples who have been together for decades often stop truly listening. Conversations revolve around logistics, bills, schedules, chores. The deeper questions, what do you dream about now? What do you fear? Remain unasked. Without fresh dialogue, love starves, not from lack of affection but from lack of curiosity. There is also the pattern of unspoken resentment. Years of small sacrifices, unmet desires, or neglected intimacy pile up. None of these resentments may be catastrophic, but together they form a quiet wall. By 45, that wall becomes impossible to ignore. The woman no longer has the energy to keep pretending. She speaks, or she withdraws. Psychologists call this the silent contract, the unspoken agreement that says, we will keep things the same to avoid discomfort. But here is the problem. Sameness is not safety. It is decay. What feels like keeping the peace is often slow erosion, and yet there is hope. When these patterns are named, they lose their power. The very act of asking the deeper questions, what part of you feels unseen? What longings have gone unspoken? Can breathe life back into the relationship. The invisible becomes visible, and with visibility comes choice. This is why so many couples fail to survive this stage. They are not destroyed by betrayal or tragedy, but by neglect of the soul. When the hunger for meaning is ignored, it does not vanish. It corrodes from within. So pause for a moment and reflect. In your closest relationships, are you truly seeing the other? Or only managing life together? Are you willing to ask the questions that feel dangerous but might save the bond? Because sometimes the smallest unseen patterns are the ones that decide whether love withers or awakens. There are moments in life when a single sentence can expose more truth than 1,000 explanations. When it comes to relationships after 45, here are some truths that deserve to be spoken without hesitation. Stability is not sameness. It is growth that adapts. How often do couples mistake routine for love? Routine has its place, but when it replaces curiosity, the relationship becomes a museum of what once was. Real stability is not clinging to the past. It is walking together into what is new. Silence is not peace. It is distance in disguise. Many think avoiding conflict protects the bond. In reality, unspoken frustrations ferment in the dark. By the time they surface, they feel like explosions. Peace is not the absence of conflict. It is the courage to face it honestly. Love does not die of passions fading. It dies of neglect. Passion naturally shifts with age, but it does not need to disappear. What truly kills love is the failure to nurture it through listening, laughter, touch, and shared meaning. Neglect, not time, is the real killer. A woman after 45 is not breaking down, she is breaking through. The world often mislabels this stage as decline, but the truth is she is stepping into a deeper self, more authentic, less willing to perform. If her partner cannot honor this, he loses the chance to know her at her most real. Resentment is simply truth unspoken for too long. Behind every cold distance is a story that was never told, a need that was never voiced, a pain that was dismissed. Resentment grows in silence, but it shrinks in the light of honest dialogue. These statements may feel uncomfortable. They are supposed to, because comfort is often the very thing that keeps couples trapped in illusions. Only when illusions are shattered can truth be seen, and only when truth is seen can love endure. So let me ask you, which of these phrases speaks most to your current stage of life? Which one feels like a mirror, reflecting something you already knew but perhaps never named? Write it down. Let it sink in. Because sometimes the right words are not advice. They are permission to finally see. Life after 45 reveals a paradox that confuses many relationships. For love to endure, something must remain constant, and yet something must also change. At first glance, this feels contradictory. How can stability and transformation coexist? But this paradox holds the secret to mature love. Let's begin with constancy. What must remain steady is commitment, the decision to keep showing up, to keep honoring the bond even when feelings fluctuate. Without this anchor, every wave of doubt would capsize the relationship. Love requires a promise that does not dissolve at the first sign of discomfort. But constancy alone is not enough. Here enters change. A woman stepping into midlife is not the same woman she was at 25 or 35. Her desires, her fears, her body, even her sense of meaning evolve. If her partner insists on clinging to the younger version of her, he is in love with a ghost. To love her truly is to meet her as she is now and as she continues to become. This is the paradox. The relationship must be rooted and fluid at the same time. Rooted in loyalty, fluid in expression. Too much constancy without change becomes suffocating sameness. Too much change without constancy becomes chaos. The balance is delicate, but it is where love matures into something profound. Philosophers have long reflected on this tension. Heraclitus taught that everything flows, nothing stands still. Yet love proves that something can endure within the flow. Augustine, centuries later, wrote that love is both rest and movement, rest in devotion, movement in growth. These insights remind us that contradiction is not weakness but wisdom. When women after 45 begin questioning, it is not a betrayal of love. It is the necessary movement that keeps love alive. But if partners cannot hold the paradox, if they demand permanence without growth or growth without permanence, the relationship fractures. So here is the reflection. What in your relationship must never change and what must never stop changing? If you can name both, you are already closer to understanding the paradox that saves love from both stagnation and dissolution. The truth is, love that survives midlife does not look like the romance of youth. It looks like two people daring to hold the tension between constancy and change, and finding in that tension a deeper freedom together. It is easy to see the midlife transformation of women as a threat, as if it were the beginning of the end. But what if, instead, it were the beginning of a new kind of intimacy? Hidden within this shift is a promise that relationships can grow beyond duty, beyond habit, into something richer and more honest. The first promise is emotional depth. When a woman begins to question her identity, she is inviting her partner into conversations that are far more real than the surface-level exchanges of earlier years. If he dares to listen, not to fix, but to understand, he may discover a dimension of her soul he has never truly known. The second promise is renewed partnership. After 45, many of the distractions that consumed earlier decades, child-rearing, career building, financial stress, begin to settle. What remains is the chance to rediscover each other not as co-managers of life, but as companions on a journey of meaning. The relationship can shift from survival to significance. The third promise is authentic connection. When roles and masks fall away, what remains is raw honesty. She no longer has the energy to pretend, and that vulnerability, though unsettling, can become the foundation for the deepest kind of trust. To be loved for who you truly are, not who you perform to be, is perhaps the greatest gift any partnership can hold. But here is the condition. These promises only unfold when both partners are willing to face discomfort. Growth always demands leaving behind illusions. For some, that is too frightening, and so they resist, clinging to the old patterns until the relationship quietly dies. For others, the courage to embrace the unknown opens a door to a love that is far stronger than youthful passion ever was. So, if you are in this season or approaching it, ask yourself, do you see only what is fading, or can you also glimpse what might be born? Because midlife is not just about endings, it is about rebirth, and the couples who survive it are not the ones who avoid change, but the ones who step into it hand in hand, willing to be remade together. The promise is there, waiting. The question is, will you choose to see it? To truly grasp what happens to women after 45, We need a framework that explains why this season feels so disruptive. Psychology, philosophy, and even history give us lenses through which the invisible becomes visible. Carl Jung called this stage individuation, the process of integrating the neglected parts of the self into wholeness. Earlier in life, identity is often shaped by external demands: career, family, societal approval. By midlife, these masks grow thin. The hidden self demands to be acknowledged. If ignored, it erupts as bitterness or depression. If embraced, it becomes the foundation for wisdom and authenticity. Erik Erikson, another psychologist, described the central challenge of midlife as generativity versus stagnation. Generativity means the desire to create, nurture, and leave a meaningful legacy. Stagnation means clinging to comfort and repeating old patterns until life feels empty. For many women, 45 is the crossroads where this decision must be made. Philosophically, this stage echoes the ancient Greek idea of telos, living toward one's ultimate purpose. In youth, purpose is often confused with ambition, but midlife strips ambition of its glamour. What remains is the deeper question: what am I here for, and what kind of human being am I becoming? History, too, reminds us that this is not new. Writers like George Eliot and Virginia Woolf portrayed women in midlife as awakening to new depths of consciousness, sometimes painfully, but always with the possibility of transformation. Across cultures, this age has often been seen not as decline but as initiation into elder wisdom. When relationships ignore this framework, they falter. A partner sees only mood swings or restlessness, missing the truth. What is happening is a universal psychological and spiritual passage. Without a map, couples mistake the journey for disaster. With a map, they can see it for what it is: a rite of passage into a more mature stage of love. So here is the invitation. Instead of labeling the shift after 45 as instability, learn to see it as a signal. A signal that deeper questions are being asked, and that a new kind of relationship is possible, one built not just on habit, but on shared meaning and authenticity. This framework does not make the passage easy, but it makes it meaningful. And meaning, in the end, is what saves love from dissolving into emptiness. So here we are, at the heart of it all. What happens to many women after 45 is not the ruin of love. It is the test of whether love was ever built to endure. It is the moment when comfort can no longer hide neglect, when roles can no longer replace authenticity, and when silence can no longer pass for peace. This stage of life demands courage from both partners. Courage to face uncomfortable truths. Courage to listen without defensiveness. Courage to meet each other not as who you once were, but as who you are becoming. It is no small task. Many relationships do not survive it, but those that do emerge with a bond stronger, deeper, and far more real than anything that came before. Here is the final paradox. The very questions that feel like threats. Who am I now? What do I want? What is still possible? Are the same questions that can breathe new life into love. They strip away illusion and reveal whether the partnership can hold not just youth and passion, but maturity and truth. So if you find yourself in this season, do not see it as an ending. See it as an unveiling. And if you are the partner of someone walking through this passage, do not retreat in fear. Lean in. Ask the dangerous questions. Listen more than you speak. Because sometimes the most radical act of love is simply to remain present when the other no longer fits the image you once held. I want to leave you with this. Relationships are not ruined by change. They are ruined by the refusal to change. Women after 45 are not breaking apart. They are breaking open. The tragedy is not the transformation itself, but our blindness to the gift hidden within it. Now it is your turn. Have you seen this shift in your own life or in someone close to you? Do you see it as a threat or as an opportunity for deeper love? Share your story in the comments. I want to hear your truth. And if these reflections have stirred something in you, remember to like this video and subscribe so we can keep exploring together what it means to grow, to love, and to live authentically. Because in the end, the question is not whether love survives after 45. The real question is, will we be brave enough to let it be reborn?